I don't know how many of us did the research, but the poorest tribes was the ones who was the biggest problem for the settlers. And if you look at the poorest tribes on reservations, they're going to take you straight to Arizona, the most impoverished tribes in the world. Did you know that?
Yeah, they said it was out in Arizona.
Yeah. So all they do, every time they have a protest, they get all of the people in the village drunk and then make them sign counterproductive contracts under alcohol. That shit still work on them people.
Same soup warmed over.
All right. It said these reservations were often located in harsh and inhospitable conditions, and the Navajo and Apache people suffered greatly as a result. Right. Then it goes on to say the U.S. government forced Native American children to attend boarding schools where they were forbidden to speak their own language or practice their own culture. This policy was intended to assimilate Native Americans into white American culture, but it often led to cultural trauma and identity loss. Right? Now, everybody know that the so-called African American have been robbed of our names, robbed of our cultures, right? Robbed of our ancient practices. But who did it? Right? Now, we still being miseducated, and we still falling for miseducated judgment calls. It said the U.S. government's treatment of Native American tribes has had a lasting legacy. That means that all the legacy that's lasting is their terror. Their reign of terror is a lasting legacy on the minds of the people. We suffering from a condition of learned helplessness. We don't want to go against the system because it looked like it belonged there. Native Americans continue to face poverty, discrimination, and other challenges as a result of their history. But they keep our history a secret. You see, they're punishing us because ignorance is no excuse to the law. And if we don't know our history, we can't use our culture to overthrow the system that's wrongly on our homeland. That we organic too. We sprang up out this motherfucker like trees in the forest. However, there is a growing movement to recognize and address the injustices that Native Americans have faced and to promote reconciliation and healing. So it ain't like they don't know that they bogus. It ain't like we don't know that they bogus. We just don't know whose job it is to do something about it. That's the real problem.
Ain't nobody doing it.
Right. It looked like ain't nobody doing nothing. But the real people whose job it is to do something about it is the ones who identify the problem with a solution.
Yeah.
If you identify the problem, you vex it to the public domain as a grievance. If somebody on the land discovered a solution to the grievance you vexed, they supposed to reach back to you and answer the grievance. If a whole lot of people got the same grievance, let's say all Christians, let's say all the Christians' grievances, they mad because the Romans got with the Jews and killed the so-called character Jesus. So now somebody got to come along and say that's a whole lot of people with that grievance. Let's find out what really happened. How do we answer this grievance? So once the grievance find a solution, the person that find the solution put it in the public domain so that the person that originally issued the grievance and all people similarly situated now have access, right, to the solution to the grievance. Right? So I got a total of 10 people, 10 areas of people activity. 9 come from Dr. Midley Fuller. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, right? So now, All this is coming from Dr. Neely Fuller's identification of how we are being subjugated. He's seen 9 areas of control, and I discovered that one needs its own category that would be a subcategory of either education, war, but that's health. See, they attack your health by poisoning the water around you, right? By poisoning the food you eat, by poisoning the food that you try to grow, by giving you fertilizer with impurities in it, using your culture to either poison you by replacing your bison with red beef. Bovine beef that's commonly used today is steer. That's not suitable meat for the consumption of the human due to its saturated fat properties, right? So they kill off the bison so they can stop us from being able to remember in the old age by clogging our brains up with bovine beef when we should be eating bison, elk, deer, but not beef. Beef is a man-made product. It's it's like a mule, so to speak. It's just one that can reproduce. It was selectively bred. All of these domestic cow breeds was domestically bred to be livestock. We let nature tend the livestock, and we called the herd because Mother Nature had a way for us to know when the animal needed to be culled. Now, what we do? We just go hunting for the heck of it. We looking for a trophy. Throw the whole animal away just to get his antlers. Right? We didn't do that. We didn't hunt for sport. We hunted for sustenance. Right? We taught our children to hunt, and that's where the sport hunting part of it come in at. It's the training ground. So that when the systems like this fall, we know how to live off the fat of the land. We know how to hunt, right? It's go on saying early American law, belligerent tribes was classified as domestic dependent nations. Now you got to remember, the nation is a corporation under the federal jurisdiction of Uniform Commercial Code. They classified us as the domestic dependent, that's livestock. We've been classified as livestock under Strawman status of nations. This meant that they were not fully sovereign, 3/5 compromised, but were under the protection of the United States government. I mean, your parents need to take care of your kids. We don't need their protection. We need to protect our children, right? Which we're about to get into in 1 minute. The concept of domestic dependent nations was first articulated by Chief Justice John Marshall in the 1823 case of Johnson versus McIntosh. In this case, Marshall held that Native American tribes had a right to the land they occupied, but that this right could be extinguished by the United States government. That means that they knew they was the enemy. They know they're the enemy, right? So if the United States government can extinguish your right, that means you're not sovereign. They took your sovereignty away. They just showed you where they did it, right? Classification of belligerent tribes as the domestic dependent nations or livestock had a number of implications. First, it meant that the United States government had a responsibility to protect the Native American tribes from outside threats. Second, it meant that the United States government had the right to regulate Native American affairs, including their internal government and economy. If you give up the right for internal government, if you give up the right to govern your own affairs to somebody else, you are choosing a slave master. That's what you're doing. Now, it made the United States had the right to regulate Native American affairs, including their internal government and economy. What was it? The first thing that Dr. Nelly Fuller said was economics. The next thing he said was education, right? The classification of belligerent tribes as domestic dependent nations has been criticized by some as being a form of colonialism. It's not a form, it is colonialism. However, it is important to note that this classification was based on the understanding of Native American tribes at the time. In the early 19th century, Native American tribes were seen as being uncivilized and incapable of self-government, right? So the classification of belligerent tribes as domestic dependent nations was seen as a way to protect them from exploitation while they exploiting us, and to help them assimilate into American society as if we want to. As if we fucking want to. Right? The classification of belligerent tribes as domestic dependent nations has since been largely abandoned. You know why? The Indigenous Rights Act. We already know what was going on, and we're making the adjustments in real time. The collective tribes of the Americas and the global tribes of the planet around the world got together at the Bang Dong Conference to come up with a solution to battle white supremacy, and the only solution was the unity of the organic tribes of the earth to fight against this outside threat that apparently don't belong here. And the reason we don't think they belong here is because everywhere they go, they scorch the earth. They leave it barren, unable to sustain life. We didn't believe in leaving the earth unable to sustain life, and it goes against the law of the tribes. So whoever's behind it can't be from the tribes, because if they was from the tribes, they would be protecting the earth from the toxins, protecting the earth from radioactive waste, from the chemical byproducts of strip mining, right? From the scorched earth philosophy of leveling the land to keep the indigenous people from using the forest as cover in case they decide to attack us again, which brought a whole community of lumberjacks as a lifestyle to life, which was part of our native maintenance crews that maintenance the forest for getting rid of the trees that was causing problems to the rest of the trees going. They turned that into a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job of tree cutting. We didn't believe in that.
They doing it in Arkansas now.
Yeah.
Putwood trucks hauling 24/7.
Non-stop.
Cutting all the trees down.
Yeah. Now we got to plant them back. But we want the walnut trees, the pecan trees, the apple trees, the cherry trees, the plum trees, the peach trees, the pomegranate trees. We want all of the trees that bear the fruits that can be consumed as foodstuffs. And them the main ones they cut down first and replace them all with apple trees. That's Johnny Appleseed. The story of Johnny Appleseed is after they destroyed the forests to hold the land together until the farmers can use it, they held the land together by the rapid growth of the apple tree. Turned to half the land into apple orchards. Apples ain't native over here.
I didn't know that.
Apples ain't native to the Americans. I'm gonna show you in a minute. I'm gonna pull it up in a minute because just because I said it, I'm gonna go show y'all. The whole story of Johnny Appleseed was to create a whole new booming business of apple production, and apple pie became the American pie, the all-American pie. Once the trees were successful, they successfully acclimated to the various parts of the land, giving us various strains of apples, right? And a lot of people don't know that.
They forced milk on us like that too, telling us it was good for our bones.
Yeah, milk. The consumption of milk is
toxic.
Well, it's supposed to use the products for cooking purposes.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to drink milk. So it's a Native American tribes that gained a great degree of self-government and are no longer seen as being under the complete control of the United States government. However, the concept of domestic dependent nations still had some relevance to today. It's still used by some legal scholars to argue that Native American tribes have certain inherent rights that cannot be extinguished by the United States government. Settlers determined if a tribe was civilized or uncivilized based on a number of factors. Now, when we get to when they classified us and reclassified us, they treated the what's called civilized tribes entirely different than they did to the non-civilized, what they call belligerent tribes or outlaw tribes. The outlaw tribes is the ones who's forced to live under the law that's belligerent to them. They automatically is against the law, right? But when we have our they call it gang literature, we call it tribe literature, right? We don't know that the gang is a tribe and that all of these tribes had been infiltrated by a government under COINTELPRO and turned us against each other as a means of keeping us from ever realizing who we